that these coup plotters and their henchmen there, they're not going to listen to the U.S. There seems to be this pro-Russian sentiment that is cropping up in Africa, and I think they're looking to Russia instead of to the U.S. or the West.
Yeah, what exactly is going on here? How much of this interference by Wagner is actually happening? Because it seems rather unclear to me.
Well, it's happening quite a bit and quite widespread. We know Wagner popularly now because of their involvement in Ukraine, both Prigozhin and his antics, as well as the cutthroats that he has gotten out of jails who make up his forces in Ukraine. But like you point out, they're in Africa too, and that's really where they began a lot of their work was Africa, Syria. They've been around doing the dirty work of Vladimir Putin, and they're back at it. So it's not just the Ukraine headlines or Belarus now, but it's also they've raised their heads. They're back in Africa, and it's quite alarming. It's they where there's instability, there's Wagner.
I see. So is this a case of Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, warning to the coup leaders that if you take on Wagner as your allies, you will be in a bad place, you will fail, and you will lose the support of many, many Western and Central African states?
Yeah, that's been a very strong message to those that have taken power. And it's one that not just the Secretary of State Blinken, but also Toria Nuland, the acting deputy secretary, and others have been saying is you're going to be playing with fire here. And we'll see if it has any impact. I have a feeling that these coup plotters and their henchmen there, they're not going to listen to the U.S. There seems to be this pro-Russian sentiment that is cropping up in Africa, and I think they're looking to Russia instead of to the U.S. or the West.
Yeah, that's a good point. We see people flying the Russian flags in the Niger capital. You know, some support from local people wearing Russian colours. How have they gained this kind of influence in a place like Niger?
Well, that's a great question. It's something that I think the West needs to really understand, and I think it's a complicated story, and it depends on which country you're really talking about. But there is still anti-colonial sentiment in that part of Africa. They're anti-French. The U.S. doesn't really spend a lot of time in Africa. We seem to go down there when we need Africa, but when we don't need African support, we're doing other things elsewhere. It's benign neglect, and I think for us to be a force against China, against Russia in that part of the globe, we can't just be, popping by every now and then. We have to have a constant presence and doing good things there. And I think right now it's in a trough. And all of a sudden, with Ukraine and with the sentiment running in favor of Russia, the West is running to Africa. U.S. and other leaders are popping up in places in Africa they've never been to before, or in the Pacific too, because of China. And so I think we're seeing that when you neglect that part of the world,
Mm.
they're going to turn to other people, and we shouldn't be surprised about that. And I think we're seeing that right now.
Well, I've spoke about this a number of times over the last week. It's the Sahel stretches right the way east to west across the central band of Africa, much of it desert. But Niger